He was once obsessed with her. Every word, every touch, a fire in his blood. Now he barely looks at her. She wonders if something is wrong with her. He wonders if something is wrong with him. But the truth is more ancient, more psychological than either of them realize. Today, we unravel the real reason why men lose interest in sex. And it's not what the world tells you. The psyche craves the unknown. Not as a thrill, seeker chases adrenaline, but as a seeker of symbols, meaning, and mystery. Deep in the structure of the human soul lies a hunger, not merely for stimulation, but for revelation. The unknown offers a mirror to the unconscious, a chance to touch what lies beyond the veil of ordinary experience. When a man falls in love or is consumed by desire, what draws him in is not simply the body before him. It is the mystery behind the eyes, the unspeakable quality that seems just out of reach. It is not her presence that consumes him, but the possibility that she contains something vast, something unsolved, something that speaks to his deepest archetype. To desire is to reach towards something that is not yet possessed. It is a psychological gesture, a motion of the soul toward completion. And so, the mind casts the other in a mythic light. She becomes a symbol, not just a person. She is chaos and cosmos, the unknown wrapped in a familiar face. The unconscious projects ancient patterns upon her. Perhaps the anima, the eternal feminine, the muse or the temptress, all rising from the deep pool of inherited memory. In the early stages of attraction, this projection is powerful. It colors reality in a golden hue. Every gesture seems profound, every silence loaded with meaning. The psyche dances, alive in the presence of a mystery. But over time, as familiarity settles in and routine replaces discovery, the mind begins to peel away the layers. The projections begin to fall. The divine becomes domestic. The mystery becomes mundane. The hunger, however, remains. And when the outer form no longer reflects the inner yearning, desire recedes. Not because the other has changed, but because the veil has lifted. The known, though comforting, does not nourish the deeper self. The psyche grows restless, starved not of love but of depth. This is not a fault of the partner. It is a feature of the human condition. We are not built to live fully in the familiar. Part of us is always reaching, always seeking a portal into the unknown. This longing is not a weakness but a spiritual drive. It is the soul's way of reminding us that comfort is not the same as aliveness. In sexuality, as in life, vitality depends on risk, on not fully knowing the outcome. The erotic thrives in uncertainty, in the tension between what is and what could be. Once that tension dies, so too does the inner fire. Modern life, with its emphasis on routine, convenience, and predictability, has made mystery a rare and fragile thing. Relationships, too, are often pressed into these molds. Efficient, logical, planned. Yet the soul recoils from this. It does not want predictability in love. It wants revelation. It wants to feel that the other still holds secrets, that within the gaze of a familiar face lies something unfamiliar. The psyche does not tire of love. It tires of seeing the same thing in the same way. And when everything becomes fully mapped, the desire for exploration must go elsewhere. This is why so many men, and indeed people, find themselves emotionally or sexually drifting, not because they seek more, but because they seek meaning, and meaning cannot be mass-produced. Desire wanes when a person becomes fully known, but not deeply understood. The hunger is not for novelty in the shallow sense, but for reconnection with the symbolic, the sacred. The soul wants to be awakened. And awakening comes not through repetition, but through rupture. Something must break the spell of the ordinary. This is why forbidden things carry such weight in the imagination, not for their morality, but for their mythic quality. They represent the threshold, the line between the known and the unknown. Even fantasies serve this purpose. They act as bridges between reality and the world of images, symbols, and dreams. Not because they are meant to be fulfilled, but because they remind the psyche that more exists than what is seen. When mystery fades, so too does the invitation to transcend. And without transcendence, the erotic becomes mechanical. The soul is not moved by mechanics. It is moved by symbols, by shadows, by the whisper of something beyond the veil. The unknown is not a threat to love. It is its oxygen. The challenge, then, is not to avoid familiarity, but to learn how to reintroduce mystery into what has become known. But most people, unaware of this deeper hunger, confuse the loss of desire with the failure of love. They do not see that the true loss was the disappearance of mystery, the vanishing of the sacred space between two people where the soul once danced, where the psyche once felt touched by something it could not name. Habituation deadens desire, not all at once, but gradually, like sunlight fading from a once glorious sky. What begins in awe, in fire, in obsessive attention, slowly becomes ordinary. The lover who once felt like a universe, whose voice could still time, and whose gaze stirred oceans, now becomes part of the furniture of life, a constant, a comfort, but no longer a spark. The same smile that once intoxicated now barely registers. The very presence that once caused sleepless nights becomes something assumed, something always there. This is the slow death of wonder, not because anything essential has changed, but because repetition makes even the miraculous seem mundane. This process is not a failure of love, but a law of the psyche. The human mind, in order to function efficiently, automates the familiar. It stops noticing what it already understands. It stops feeling deeply about what it sees every day. This is not heartlessness, it is adaptation. When we walk into a room with a strong scent, we notice it intensely at first, but over time the scent disappears from awareness. The stimulus remains, but our perception withdraws. This same psychological mechanism operates in relationships. What once thrilled begins to blur into the background of ordinary life. The person we once adored becomes predictable, not because they lack complexity, but because we no longer look with open eyes. In the early stages of connection, every detail is alive. A glance, a phrase, a hand brushing a wrist can flood the system with electricity. This is because we are still exploring, still uncovering, still unsure. The beloved is still a question, still a mystery to be solved. Our attention is heightened, our imagination engaged. We're not just responding to who they are, we're responding to what they represent. They symbolize newness, potential, a portal to something beyond our current identity. But over time, as routines settle in and roles are defined, the symbolic begins to fade. The partner becomes known, categorized, expected. The hunger of discovery is replaced by the habit of repetition. Desire is closely tied to attention. What we attend to, we value. What we ignore, we begin to devalue, not consciously, but subtly, in the way we stop leaning forward, the way we stop pausing to notice, the way we stop wondering. When someone becomes part of our daily landscape, the soul stops reaching for them. They are there, always there, and thus taken for granted. Not in a cruel way, but in a deeply human one. We no longer chase what we assume cannot be lost. And in that certainty, desire dissolves. This is the great paradox of intimacy. The more we know someone, the less they surprise us. But surprise is essential to erotic life. Not surprise in the sense of novelty for novelty's sake, but surprise as in the reawakening of presence. In long-term connection, the challenge is not keeping the relationship alive. It is keeping the attention alive. When attention dies, so does desire. And attention is the first victim of habituation. It is not that love dies, but that its intensity gets dulled by repetition. The lover becomes a pattern, a loop, a story already read. And once the narrative feels finished, the imagination retreats. The mind, in search of renewal, begins to drift. The tragedy of this drift is not that people fall out of love, but that they fall out of awareness. They no longer truly see each other. They move through rituals, exchange gestures, maintain duties, but the sacred tension is gone. The space between them is filled not with anticipation, but with predictability. Even sex, once electric, becomes a choreography of muscle memory. The spontaneity, the rawness, the primal pull, it all softens under the weight of habit. The very person who once awakened the wild now feels as tame as a routine drive home. And yet the hunger remains. Even when the partner becomes invisible, the yearning for aliveness does not disappear. It simply turns inward, or outward, or elsewhere. The psyche still longs to be stirred. When it cannot find that stirring in the familiar, it begins to fantasize about other sources. It seeks what it has lost, not in the partner, but in the experience the partner once evoked. This is not infidelity of character, but of imagination. The mind begins to wander because it is no longer being fed. It searches for poetry where only prose remains. It looks for fire where only ash sits. And the tragic irony is that the fire may not be gone. It may simply be unseen. Projection erodes over time. In the beginning, attraction is rarely grounded in truth. It is not the real person we fall in love with, but the story we tell ourselves about them. The unconscious casts its ancient symbols onto the blank screen of a stranger. She becomes more than herself. She becomes everything he has longed for, everything he has denied, everything he has forgotten. Her smile carries the weight of maternal warmth or the thrill of forbidden danger. Her silence is not silence but mystery. Her gaze is not just a gaze. It is the promise of healing, of wholeness, of something sacred that he cannot name. She becomes a vessel for his deepest yearning, and he, often unknowingly, pours his soul into her image. This is not deception. It is archetypal. The psyche is a painter, and its brush is projection. In the absence of deep knowledge, the unconscious fills in the gaps. It takes fragments, gestures, words, moods, and weaves them into a myth. That myth is seductive because it is ours. It reflects not who they are, but who we need them to be. Early love is often less about meeting the other and more about meeting ourselves, or more precisely, meeting the parts of ourselves we have forgotten, exiled, or repressed. The beloved seems to bring those lost fragments to life. We see in them the possibility of becoming whole. But this projection is fragile. It cannot survive reality. As time passes, the cracks begin to show. The goddess forgets to text back. The muse has morning breath. The savior has insecurities. The mystery becomes routine. And slowly, the golden aura fades. What was once magical becomes ordinary. The partner, once exalted, descends from the pedestal. We begin to see not the fantasy, but the flawed, human being behind it. The illusion collapses, not with a crash, but with a slow, painful unraveling. This unraveling can feel like betrayal, but it is not the other who has betrayed us. It is our own unconscious. The betrayal is of our illusion. We did not love them purely. We loved the projection they carried. And once that projection dissolves, we are left with someone who may be beautiful and complex in their own right, but they are no longer a mirror for our fantasies. They no longer serve our inner myth, and for many, this moment is deeply disorienting. They confuse the loss of projection with the loss of love. But projection, by its nature, cannot last. It is unsustainable. The unconscious eventually corrects itself. It withdraws the symbols and returns them to their rightful place. Inside the self, what we saw in the other was always within us. The beauty we adored, the fire we chased, the soul we claimed to have found. It was a reflection of our own depth. The other merely held up the mirror, and once that function is fulfilled, the mirror becomes clear. We see the person, not the projection. And that seeing is either the beginning of true intimacy or the end of infatuation. The shift from projection to perception is a psychological death. Something within us dies. The story, the fantasy, the imagined connection. And yet, within that death lies the potential for rebirth. To know the other truly, without the veil of projection, is a rare and courageous act. It requires us to relinquish control, to release the fantasy, and to meet the person where they are, not where we need them to be. Few are prepared for this. Many seek a new projection, a new face, a new fantasy. They repeat the cycle over and over, mistaking the collapse of illusion for the collapse of love. The psyche resists this collapse. It mourns the fantasy. The loss of projection feels like the loss of meaning, because in the projection we saw hope, transcendence, and escape. Reality, by contrast, feels limited, flawed, raw. But this rawness is the soil of real connection. If we can tolerate it, if we can endure the disillusionment, we may find something deeper than fantasy. We may find love that is not built on idealization, but on presence. Yet for many, the erosion of projection feels like a desert. The mind begins to hunger again, for mystery, for spark, for someone else to carry the projection we refuse to reclaim. The problem is not the partner. It is our refusal to face what we have placed upon them. The truth is that no one can carry our unconscious forever. Eventually, it must be brought back home. Desire is fueled by distance, not simply by physical space, but by psychological space, by the sense that something or someone is just beyond reach. That longing, that stretch toward the other, ignites the fire of wanting. It is in the absence, the space between two people, where desire takes root. The mind begins to wander, to imagine, to fill in the unknown with color and heat. The lack of immediate access creates tension, and from that tension, passion is born. The more immediate and predictable a presence becomes, the more it is taken for granted by the psyche. What is always available gradually loses its pull, not because it is any less valuable, but because its very presence becomes normalized, absorbed into the background of routine life. Intimacy, while deeply nourishing in emotional terms, carries within it the seeds of desire's decline. When every gesture is known, when every rhythm of the other is memorized, the mystery begins to fade. The mind no longer projects, because there is nothing left to project onto. There is no space for imagination to bloom. And without imagination, desire grows stale. Eroticism does not thrive in total transparency. It needs veils, suggestion, glimpses. When a partner becomes entirely available, emotionally, physically, mentally, when their thoughts, behaviors, and habits become entirely mapped, the erotic loses its edge. The unknown is what sharpens the senses, makes the pulse quicken, drives curiosity. In its absence, longing turns to habit, and habit to indifference. Absence, paradoxically, revives presence. When someone is gone, whether through distance, silence, or temporary withdrawal, their image becomes more potent. The mind, deprived of contact, begins to reach out. Memory, imagination, and fantasy converge. We begin to remember not only what the person is, but what they mean. We fill their absence with meaning, often more meaning than we were capable of seeing in their presence. The soul begins to stir with a kind of ache, a recognition of something missing. This ache, this emptiness, is the birthplace of longing. In it, desire finds new life. It is a strange irony that we often feel closest to someone not when they are near, but when they are just out of reach. Their absence makes them vivid again. Their voice echoes in our mind with more clarity. Their scent, once ignored, returns in waves of memory. The familiarity that dulled our senses begins to burn away, revealing the raw emotion beneath. We begin to crave again, not just physically, but existentially. We long not only for touch, but for the reconnection with a version of the self that was more alive, more engaged, more stirred by the presence of another. In this way, desire becomes not just a yearning for the other, but a yearning for ourselves as we were in their mystery. When everything is known, the erotic collapses under the weight of certainty. But when a partner remains just slightly unknowable, when their inner world retains some distance, some sacred interior untouched by routine, the desire to reach them remains. This is not a call for emotional withdrawal, but for depth, for allowing enough psychological space within intimacy to let the other remain a mystery, to allow them to be something more than an extension of ourselves, to resist the urge to possess them so completely that nothing remains to chase. Chasing is not merely a game of ego, it is the psyche's way of staying alive. When we chase, we are alive to the moment. We feel the thrill of becoming, and so often, when a partner becomes fully available, the chase ends, not because love ends, but because the psychological tension that powered desire is no longer there. The one who once lit fires in us becomes predictable. The dynamic flattens. Desire, without resistance or distance, becomes lazy. It curls up in familiarity and slowly disappears. The modern relationship ideal, complete transparency, full availability, total emotional intimacy, often forgets the fundamental truth that desire is maintained not by closeness alone, but by the dance between closeness and distance. We need room to breathe, to imagine, to approach each other with new eyes. Lovers become lovers again, not when they are always together, but when they occasionally step away far enough to miss, to reflect, and to return with renewed hunger. Without that space, the fire that once consumed us turns into warmth. Comfort replaces craving. The soul, deprived of distance, forgets how to ache, how to want, how to reach for what it does not yet fully possess.